Welcome back to Pizza Bytes, where I teach you programming in bite-sized pieces. My name's Alex. In today's lesson, I'm going to teach you the very backbone of every single Java program. That, of course, is the Java object. Now, no program can exist without a Java object, and most programs contain tens, hundreds, oftentimes thousands of Java objects just to get the functionality that they need. And so it's really important for us to understand what are Java objects. But to understand the software side of objects, it's actually easier to think of physical, real-life objects. So look in the space that you are in, look around, and you can find some objects. First thing that comes to mind is my lamp. I have my microphone. I have this Sharpie. And then I have this book laying around. It's one of my kids' books. It's You Are Special. And so thinking in terms of these physical objects, we can group information about these objects into two categories. The first category is what attributes do these objects contain? For example, what is the title of this book? What is the color of this book? Is the book open or closed? How many pages long is it? Those are all attributes of the book. They're characteristics of the book. The second category of information that we can know about this book is what actions can be performed with this book. So books are quite simple, actually. You kind of just open them and then you close them, right? That's the function of the book. Those are the actions you can do with it. And so a Java object is really the same thing. Java objects are often representations of physical objects, or they're made up virtual objects, but we treat them in the same way as we would treat a real-life object. I'll give you a quick example. If you're making a program that stores books for your user, you would have an object, a Java object, called book, right? And you'd have many of these objects, one for each book that you're storing for your user. But also you'd have an object that would store the books. So maybe you would name this object bookshelf, and you would place the books in there like a bookshelf. Perhaps you would check out those books and you would call this object the librarian. It really doesn't matter how you name things. What matters is that objects in Java help you represent through code what is going on in your program. All right, now comes the fun part. Let's make our own Java object. And so we're going to choose something simple. I think this book would fit, and we're going to try to model it in Java. The first thing you want to do, let's open up NetBeans IDE and create a new project. And I want to call this project book. And just click finish. However, before we can make this book, that is, before we can make this specific book object, we have to write a blueprint for all book objects. The blueprint will define what attributes and behaviors all book objects should have. Not just this book object, but any book object that might make it into your library. The name of the blueprint that we are writing is called the Java class. It's called a class because it defines a specific class of objects, specifically books. For us, I think the important information will be the title of the book and the length of the book, that is how many pages it has. And the important behavior that we want in our Java object, in our book object, will be opening the book and closing the book. So let's look at the class that we have so far that was automatically generated by NetBeans. In the definition of this class, you see the public keyword. Now this is called an access modifier. It's not so important for us right now, but all it's saying is that this class can be publicly accessed from other classes and other programs. Then we have the keyword class, which is showing the compiler, telling the compiler, I'm going to define a class next. And finally, we have the name of the class, in this case, book. And when you're naming a class, you capitalize every word. So if this was library book, the word library would be capitalized, and so would the word book. This is the identifier of the class, or the name of the class. What's important to note so far is that the class name should be the same as the .java file that it is contained in. So you see we're in the book.java file, and the class is named book. Okay, now let's add the attributes that we want for our specific book object. Information about the characteristics of objects is going to be stored in variables. Java variables are the same thing as algebra variables, where you would have x equals 5. So x is the variable, and it really holds the value of 5. And in the same way, Java variables store a specific value. In this case, we're going to create a variable that stores the name of the book. First, we have the access modifier public to show that this is a publicly accessible variable. Now we're going to list the type of variable. In Java, all variables have types. So you have to say, is it a number? Is it just a single character? Is it a series of characters called a string? A variable could also hold another Java object. In this case, we're going to call it a string of characters, or simply string. It has to be capitalized, and then we're going to give the variable a name. In this case, we're going to call it title. Of course, every single statement in Java has to end with a semicolon. So if you look, it's going to be red because the compiler is not happy because I have not finished my statement. So I put the semicolon. Now we have public string title. I'm saying that we have a public variable. The data type is string, and the name of the variable is title. When naming variables, it's important to pay attention that it's not the same as naming classes. While in classes, every new word is capitalized, in variables, the first word is actually lowercase, and then every other new word after that is going to be capitalized. So we not only want to know the title of the book, we also want to know how many pages long that book is. So put a few enters here, and you're going to write in public. This time is going to be lowercase int for integer. So it's going to be a number, an integer value. And I'm going to call this length in pages. And so of course, it's red. What does it want? It wants a semicolon. There you go. Now we're done with that statement. Now you can assign a value to this length number here, and you can say equals 50, right? 50 pages. However, you don't want to do that yet because not every book that is going to be generated from this template is going to be 50 pages long. So we're going to leave this value unassigned right now, and all we're saying in this template is that this variable is going to exist in every object. And so don't worry, we will get into how to use variables in the next lesson. That's lesson number 3. But for now, this is enough. I showed you how to declare variables, and these variables are really just characteristics of our objects, right? Things like the color, the number of pages, the title. Now let's move on to the functionality of our objects. I mentioned earlier that our book object is going to have 2 basic functions, open and close. And so to show behavior or functions in a Java object, you start the same way. We're going to make this a public method. You also put a data type, but in this case, I don't want it to return anything. So I'm going to say void, don't return anything at all, empty. And then the name of the function will be open, because that describes what the function does. And I'm not going to explain this right now, but you just put in these parentheses like that, open and close parentheses, and then you put an opening brace. When you press enter, NetBeans will create a closing brace for you as well. These curly braces are important because they define what block of code will be executed when we call the open method. So the open method is not something that stores data. Instead, the open method is something that carries out a function when it's called. And so the function that it carries out will be programmed in between those curly braces. We call this a block of code. So we're going to put a block of code between these curly braces, and that's what's going to be carried out. Since this is just going to be a simple program, what I want you to do is copy the print line statement from here and paste it inside of open, and make it a little bit neater here. Paste it inside of the open, inside of the curly braces here. What we want to happen when we call the open function is that it says something like book has been opened. Okay, and we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it, but we're going to rename the second method close. And so instead of the book has been opened, we're going to say the book has been closed. Now we know that our book has a few characteristics such as the title and the length of the book in pages. Also, we have a few functions or actions associated with the book. That is, we can open the book and we can close the book. There's a lot more info on both variables and methods or functions that we can get into, but we're not going to get into all that today. We just want to understand the basics. Alrighty, if you remember, a few minutes ago, I said that we're going to create a template for book objects. If you remember that, this is not actually a book object. This is a class, and this is a template from which we can create book objects. We're pretty much telling the Java program how you can create book objects. So we defined what a book object will look like, right? It's going to have a title, it's going to have a length and pages, and it's going to have these two functions to carry out. To actually create a book object with its own title, with its own number of pages, we have to go to the main method. If you remember from the last video, the main method is where the Java program enters. This is the starting place of every single Java program. And remember that at least one of your classes in your program needs to have a main method, because that will be the starting point from where your program launches. All right, now finally, let's create our first book object. Go ahead, delete this print line statement. We're going to write in here, book. Why? Because that is the object that we're creating. It's a book object. The name of the book object can be anything. Let's just say it's first book. You see the first word is lowercase, the second word is capitalized. And then we're going to assign this a value. To make a new object, you write new book. And then you place the parentheses and you place a semicolon. Yes. Now I want to change the title of the first book because it does not have any title assigned yet. So I'm going to go to a new line and write first book. To access any of the variables or functions in the book, you have to press the period button, and the IDE will pop up with some suggestions. So you can access the length in pages or you can access the title. I want to change the title first. And so to assign a value to the title, you press space and press equals, and then write your title in between quotation marks. So our book here is You Are Special. Close quotation marks, and it's red. It probably wants a semicolon. The semicolon says, I'm done with this statement. Let's move on to the next command. Okay, deal. Let's press enter. For the next command, I want to assign this book a number of pages. So we're going to do the same thing. First book. I'm going to access the variables of that book. You can double click or you can press enter and the IDE will write this in for you. So I just double clicked length and pages, and we can see that I can assign a value here. This book has 31 pages. So I'm going to put 31, end of statement. Now I want the program to print out the book's title and the length of the book. So to do that, we're going to copy this print line statement. Just copy it, paste it in here. I'm going to paste the second one. I don't like having two lines, so I'm going to erase one. But instead of this phrase, I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to copy this first book.title and put it in here. So it's going to print the first book's title. And then I'm going to copy first book.length and pages. I'm going to erase this phrase and paste it in here. So I'm going to print the title and the length and pages of the first book. I also want to check if the open and close functions work. So we're going to call those functions in the same way. We're going to say first book, I want you to open. Okay, and then you do the parentheses. We'll get into that later on lesson 4. And then the statement is complete. You put a semicolon. Now for the second one, you do the same thing. First book.close. I want you to close, semicolon. We're just about ready to test our program. However, before we test our program, I want you to notice something. The whole time that we've been writing in the main method, we've been writing on one single level of indentation here. See how everything is neatly indented? The IDE keeps track of indentation for you. And in most programming languages, indentation is actually very important. It helps keep your program neat. So every time you have an opening curly brace, you increase the level of indentation. Then when you have a closing curly brace, you decrease the level of indentation. So if you take a look, when we're declaring the book class, we're on the first level of indentation. Then we have the opening brace and the indentation goes up by 1 tab, right? If you press tab, it goes up like that. So it goes up by one tab from the left. Now, whenever we have a new curly brace, it goes up by one tab again. And so everything inside of the main method is increased by one tab just like that. Alrighty, I think we're ready to test our program. So if you go up to the top, you can press the green play button and then just let the NetBeans IDE do everything for you. It'll save, compile, and run your program. We're just going to watch the screen here to see, there it is. We have everything printed exactly what we expected, right? We expected the title to be printed. We expected the book length to be printed. And of course, we called the open and we called the close functions. So opened, closed, everything was carried out successfully. Congratulations on creating your first Java object. So we learned today that Java objects are the backbone of every Java program, and Java objects are modeled after real-life objects. They have both characteristics or qualities that are stored in variables, and they have functions or they have behaviors that are defined by the methods inside of those objects. If some of this made sense and you enjoyed the video, make sure to click like and to subscribe, because lesson 3 will be coming out soon, where I will talk all about Java variables in detail. In the meanwhile, I want you to tinker with that program and see if you can customize this Java object, give it some new attributes, give it some new behaviors, see what you can do with it. I'll see you later, and in the meanwhile, happy coding.